Hello students, welcome back to our discussion of Chapter 11. We'll go into this slide, the experience effect. Experience effect shows the based or graphed by a experience curve, basically just reductions in production costs that have been observed to occur over the life of a product. Basically, as an organization gains more experience in the production of a certain product, costs decrease. This is explained through learning effects and economies of scale. So learning effects, as it says there, are reductions in costs due to learning. Think about this. Think of, for an example, think of the time it took you to write your very first research paper as a first-year college student versus the time it takes you now. Hopefully it takes you less time and you're able to just as good, or if not better, hopefully better, in terms of grade on a research paper. There are cost savings, time, savings that come from learning by doing. Economies of scale refer to those reductions in cost due to producing a large volume of a product. So those are how experience curve and effects are manifested. Nice little graph. The significance of the experience curve is clear, as it says there. Moving down that experience curve allows a firm to reduce its costs of creating value. So the more you're able to do it, the faster or the cheaper you are able to produce that product. And of course, if you move down that curve, gain that experience quicker, you'll have that cost advantage compared to your competitors. One example your textbook uses is the manufacturing that airline manufacturing or airplane manufacturing is. They realized that the more they did it, the cost came down significantly after so many products or items were produced. One key to progressing downward on the experience curve as rapidly as possible is to increase the volume produced by that single plant as rapidly as possible. So you expand to a new market or expand within your market. You have a new facility or plant or some type of factory. Basically, you want to get that up and running as quickly as possible, produce as many products as possible, because your costs are going to come down as a function of your fixed costs over your output. There's another example in your textbook on page 387, the Japanese firms that were competing on producing the very first video cassette recorder. So some of you may not be aware of what is a video cassette recorder, but basically this is a magnetic tape that you would have into a video cassette recorder, a VCR, where you could record TV shows and movies and whatnot and play them back. So this, just like we've had with the banana wars and tomato wars, this caused a videotape format war, which has its own Wikipedia site as well. Basically, this is the video cassette recorders and the formats that were used in terms of VHS or Betamax. And there was another group as well that were competing on trying to get the best magnetic tape, and hence the VCR that would play that tape, out to market quicker and to capture most of the marketplace. Interesting read. Format war continues onto this site as well. goes into, well, this is different types of format wars, where we have even rail rays as well, but the videotape format, quite interesting. This is one I wanted to go to because there was a third party that got involved and were close to capturing the market, but made some decisions that forced them out. So VHS won out because they were able to produce a video tape that was able to play longer, and then when they had that, they mass produced it and actually enabled other manufacturers to produce the actual player. So once that player was produced, it only worked on or would only work with their magnetic tape that they had produced. So then they became the standard. Really great decision by them to allow other manufacturers to produce the actual cassette player, because they had the tape. Same thing that Microsoft did when they were competing with Apple. Some of you may think that Apple is a better computer, others may disagree, like me, but Microsoft went out because they allowed other manufacturers to produce their a computer, and they would give them the software. So basically, they're able to produce their computers cheaper. There are more options in terms of what type of computer you want, but it all came with the same hardware, which enabled Microsoft to gain that market share. So let's continue on to leveraging core competencies. So it refers to skills within the firm that competitors cannot easily match or imitate. These skills may exist in any of the firm's value creation activities. Research and development, HR, even general management, etc. So core competencies, for example, what is McDonald's really good at? You may think they're really good at producing a really cheap burger-like sandwich, or producing other products, but they are really good at, if you've ever worked at McDonald's, they are really good at managing fast food operations. They have it down to a science. If you ever looked at or gained access to some of their binders, they have binders and procedures, protocols on producing everything within their store. So they are really good at managing the fast food operations, which allows them to be consistent, allows them to reduce their costs, allows them to produce that same standard of product anywhere. Someone doesn't have to be really well trained to cook. All they have to do is follow the instructions, and the more you follow it, the easier it becomes, and then you kind of gain some of the experience, and you're able to do it much quicker. So that's what McDonald's is really good at. Walmart, what they're really good at, you might think distributing products, and it's their distribution network, the process that other competitors have not been able to capitalize as much on. For example, Target, when they came up to Canada, they did not have the same distribution network or process, just-in-time inventory, for example, and just their whole process of getting products from the warehouses to the actual retail outlets. Walmart is really good at that. Other firms not so. So leveraging those skills, applying them to other operations within your global network creates value. So we're going to go into a significant part of this chapter is the pressures For cost reductions, remember we talked about those two strategies earlier on, differentiation and cost. So there's two significant pressures that firms realize especially in the international marketplace, is the pressure to reduce costs, to keep costs low, and the pressure to be locally responsive. So of course, when it's hard to have both. If you are being locally responsive, producing a product or a service that meets the unique tastes and preferences of your local market, your costs are going to be higher. You may have to advertise more. You're producing a slightly different product, so of course that comes with that enhanced cost. So there's that balance between creating the same product, which would have a lower cost, or being locally responsive to the local demands, which then increases your costs. So being more responsive to local demands, higher costs, but of course more happy customers. Global marketing scheme or a locally responsive marketing plan. So a lot of it comes back to marketing, educating the consumer what your product is. Do you offer a slightly different product? Or is it just a perceived difference? And what kind of costs are involved in that? So, pressures for the cost reductions forces a firm to lower their unit costs. So there's pressures in the marketplace that if you want to compete, you have to find ways to lower your costs. Being locally responsive requires the firm to adapt its product, change its product to meet local demands in each market. But as I've said, this strategy raises costs. Some argue, and there's lots of research on both sides, some argue that the differences in local responsiveness are declining. So, tastes and preferences globally are kind of converging, whereas there is an equal amount of research on the other side saying that those tastes and preferences local consumers have are actually diverging, are actually becoming more different. If you look at some of the research, it's some of the differences in their findings are based on the type of product or service that they're studying. For some products, it's more of a standardized product is becoming the norm. For other types of industries or products, it's more diverging. It's coming different. So pressures for local responsiveness have those four elements in mind here. Differences in consumer tastes and preferences. So one could argue that McDonald's hamburgers are the same everywhere. And when I've traveled, I've actually made a point, not because I like McDonald's, but made a point to go into McDonald's of the various countries I've visited just to see what kind of difference and similarities there exist. And even though it may look similar, the menu looks the same more or less, there are some slight differences. But McDonald's basically is the same everywhere. It's more identical than different. But there are some slight differences in some of their products, or they may offer different products different places as well. I'll talk about this later on as well. But McDonald's in the Philippines offers spaghetti, for example. Infrastructure, traditional practices. In North America, we have 110 volts is common. In Europe and most everywhere else, 240 volts is common. So if you're producing a product in the States and you want to sell it to Europe, you have to take that difference into consideration. Differences in distribution channels. In Germany, there's a handful of retailers. Like Canada, in Italy, there's many food retailers, so getting into the market is problematic. Host government demands. Why is one prescription drug available in Canada and it's not prescribed in other countries? So that's some of the differences. We'll continue this in the next slide or the next video.